morning, everybody.
Good morning.
To those who are visiting, we got a tall task in front of us because we're reading an Old Testament prophetic book. So we don't got the easy Gospels in front of us today. But I think that we can actually understand this one if we just get a little bit of background on this. So I'm going to read for us Obadiah, which is the book that we're studying today. If you're looking for Obadiah, you could either cheat in your table of contents, or if you've got the Bible app, you can just look at it there. But if you're looking at the normal way, you can sing the song to yourself. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah. So it goes Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah. Jonah, Micah, and Nahum comes after that. So if you're in Jonah, Micah, and Nahum, you're too far. Would you stand, please? It's Obadiah. Obadiah. The vision of Obadiah. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom. We have heard a message from the Lord. An envoy was sent to the nations to say, "Rise, let us go against her for battle. See, I will make you small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rocks and make yourself home on the heights. You say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? Though you soar like an eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. If thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what disaster awaits you. Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? If grape pickers came to you, would not they leave a few grapes? But how Esau will be ransacked, his hidden treasures pillaged. All your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. Those who eat your bread will set a trap for you, but you will not detect it. In that day, declares the Lord, will I not destroy the wise men of Edom, those of the understanding in the mountains of Esau? Your warriors, Taman, will be terrified, and everyone in Esau's mountains will be cut down in the slaughter. Because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. On the day you stood aloof, while strangers carried off his wealth, and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. You should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor gloat over them in their calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of trouble. The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. Just as you drank on my holy hill, so all the nations will continually drink. They will drink and be as if they had never been. But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and Jacob will possess his inheritance. Jacob will be a fire and Joseph a flame. Esau will be a stubble, and they will set him on fire and destroy him. There will be no survivors from Esau. The Lord has spoken. People from the Negev will occupy the mountains of Esau, and people from the foothills will possess the lands of the Philistines. They will occupy the fields of Ephraim and Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. This company of Israelite exiles who are in Canaan will possess the land as far as Zarephath, and the exiles from Jerusalem who are in Sepharad will possess the towns of the Negev. Deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. This is God's word.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. Okay, so we've got a bit of a tall task here. There's a lot of stuff. If you just read through this, you might have been quite confused on what all is being talked about. Hopefully you at least picked up that this is about Edom, because it says that in verse 1. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom. But what's going on? What's the background of this very vague Old Testament prophecy? In philosophy, there's what's called the trolley problem. Has anyone heard of the trolley problem? Okay, I will pitch it to you and see how you feel. So you are walking across and you see that this is a very strange hypothetical, but this is philosophy, so you're going to have to deal with it. There are 5 people who are just lying down on a track. They got tied up with ropes or something like that. They're lying down on a track, and a trolley is just barreling towards these 5 people. On the other track is one person, a worker, who's working on the tracks, but is completely, let's say that this person is completely deaf, and you're very far away from this person. Now the trolley is going to kill these 5 people unless you pull the lever, in which it will be diverted, and the 5 people will not die, and instead it will kill the one worker. And let's just assume, for the sake of the hypothetical, you cannot save this one person. It's either 5 people die, or you pull the lever, and this one person who's just working on the track will die instead. Okay, take a poll. Who is going to pull the lever, which means you grab the lever, you pull it, and then instead of killing 5 people, you will kill the one person? Raise your hand. Be proud, come on, pull the lever. All right, we got a good amount of people. When people have been polled on this, we've got actually about 75% of people who will tend to pull the lever, because they say there are 5 people on one side, 1 person on the other side. I'm just going to count the number of lives. I'm going to say it's a net gain of 4 lives, so I should pull the lever and save the net gain of 4 people. One of the reasons why we're motivated, I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer this hypothetical for you. If you really want to know what I think, you can come up to me and talk after. But the point of this hypothetical, the reason why it's even a question is because we realize if we do nothing, we can still be held accountable. If we decide, okay, I'm kind of scared, I don't know what to do, like this is kind of tough, and we let the trolley just roll over 5 people, we will feel like we've done something bad, because we could have saved them. If I upped the ante and gave you a different hypothetical and said that there's a guy and he's walking next to a child and he sees that a car is coming at him very fast, it's good for him to take the child with him. In fact, if he sees a car is barreling at him and this random child is walking next to him and he just bolts out of there and he lets the child die, we'd all say, that guy has some problems. Because there's still something wrong even if we weren't the ones to do it. If we were the bystanders, we can still be guilty of something. That is the message of Obadiah. What the Edomites didn't do is what they're held accountable for when their brother, Israel, was being attacked. So I'm going to give you some background on Obadiah first, and then we will go into, there are 3 sections in Obadiah, but I'll give you some background, we'll go into the 3 sections, and then I'll give you 3 applications. Okay, so for background, Obadiah, shortest book in the Old Testament, not even technically a chapter, it just has a certain number of verses, 21 verses, shortest book. It's a bunch of poems of divine judgment that this prophet Obadiah has against the nation of Edom. Edom is the descendants of the people of Esau. So if you go all the way back in Israelite history, we got Abraham and Sarah, who have Isaac, their son, who they were about to sacrifice him, and then God said, don't sacrifice him. Isaac marries Rebekah. Isaac and Rebekah have 2 sons, twins, Jacob and Esau. And if you have siblings, then you probably know what it's like to have siblings. It's not always the most fun thing. In fact, I was just at a friend's house this week, and her sister came and said, oh, can I borrow a shirt? And she said, no, you smell like garlic. If I give you my shirt, it'll never come out, even in the wash. And I was like, give her the shirt. And she didn't give her the shirt because she didn't want to let her shirt smell like garlic. So anyway, so you know what it's like to have sibling rivalries. And we know that Jacob and Esau, they had an actual sibling rivalry. If you read the stories, Jacob is double-crossing Esau, and Esau's always mad at Jacob, and they're like fighting all the time. They're brothers who have a lot of beef. From them so Jacob is the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, and so that becomes the nation of Israel. And then Edom is the tribes that come from Esau. So each of them have their own people. And perhaps unsurprisingly, the people also do not get along. The descendants of Esau and Israel do not get along. In fact, there's a story in Numbers chapter 20 that tells us one particular example of this enmity between these 2 warring factions, where the Israelites were trying to walk through Edom, because there's this big land of Edom, and they're like, let's just walk through. And the Edomites are like, no, you're going to have to run around our city, because we're not letting you walk through. Let me read the story for you. This is from Numbers 20, verse 14. Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom, saying, this is what your brother Israel says. You know about all the hardships that have come on us. Our ancestors went down into Egypt, and we lived there many years. The Egyptians mistreated us and our ancestors. When we cried out to the Lord, he heard our cry and sent an angel and brought us out of Egypt. Now here we are at Kadesh, a town on the edge of your territory. Please let us pass through your country. We will not go through any field or vineyard. We will not drink any water from any well. We will travel along the king's highway and will not turn to the right or to the left until we have passed through your territory. Edom answered, You may not pass through here. If you try, we will march out and attack you with our sword. The Israelites replied, We will go only along the main road. And if we or our livestock drink any of your water, we will pay for it. We only want to pass through on foot, nothing else. And again they answered, You may not pass through. Then Edom came out against them with a large and powerful army. And since Edom refused to let them go through their territory, Israel turned away from them. So we know that there is quite a lot of struggle between these two brothers, Esau and Jacob. And this continues into what we have in the book of Obadiah. What Obadiah is telling us is about the ransacking of Judah by the Babylonians. So if you know anything about Israelite history, what happened was Israel, under David, King David, was a singular nation. And then his son Solomon was a singular nation. But God had said to David, because you have disobeyed me in sleeping with Bathsheba, your nation will be divided. And sure enough, Solomon's son, Rehoboam, says something really dumb. He says he's going to raise taxes. And so half of the nation leaves. So then there's the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom has a lot of really bad kings. So they go kind of off the deep end pretty fast. And they get ransacked by the Assyrians very quickly. The southern nation is like a little bit better, but a lot of their kings are still apostatizing, still sacrificing like child sacrifices, still offering on the high places. And so eventually the southern kingdom is also doing bad things. God sends so many prophets to them. Keep doing the same old thing. So eventually God brings his judgment upon them in the form of the Babylonians, about 586 BC. So about 586 is when the Babylonians come and they just siege Jerusalem for many, many years until they finally breach the city. Bad things happen. You know, there's murders, there's rapes. There's actually a story that the Israelites tell of where the Babylonians entered the city, took their infants, and smashed them against the walls of the city. This is how bad it was. So you can imagine the Israelites are in pain when they think about this moment. And you know who doesn't help them? Is their brother, the Edomites. And that's what Obadiah is about. So let's turn to Obadiah. There are 3 sections here in Obadiah. There's verses 1 through 9, which is the promise of judgment. There's verses 10 through 14, which is the justification, the reason why they are being judged. And then there's 15 through 21, which is an expansion of that judgment. So you've got, here's the promise that judgment will happen. Here's the reason why you're being judged. And here's an expansion that this judgment will be for all nations. Let's go through each of those sections. Now I would encourage you, if you don't have a Bible, pull it up on your phone or anything like that, because it will be helpful to have the text in front of you. Obadiah chapter, well, it's not really in chapters, it's just Obadiah verse 1. So first, there's a proclamation that we've heard a message from the Lord, Obadiah says, that there's a nation that says, let's go against Edom in battle. And God says to Edom, I will make you small among the nations, verse 2. You will be utterly despised. Edom was feeling pretty good. In fact, they lived in a very high mountain. If you imagine like the Grand Canyon, because I looked up pictures of Edom, I guess I should have shared it with you so that you could see on the screen, but if you imagine the Grand Canyon, they're like very tall, they're very tall precipices, and Edom is kind of hidden behind all these stone structures. And so they consider themselves high up in the clefts of the rocks. And they're a pretty small nation, but that's a strategic advantage, right? To be able to be high up in the rocks, and so they feel pretty good. Verse 3, the pride of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rocks, make your home on the heights. And verse 4, though you soar like an eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down. So God is saying, you think you're all great. You think you're hidden. You think that nobody will ever be able to beat you. I will take you down. And then there's this very strange section in verse 5 where it says, if thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what disaster awaits you. Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few grapes? What are we talking about with grape pickers and stuff? Here's what the passage is saying. If robbers came, they don't take every single thing in your house. Now, I've never had my home robbed, but I assume if robbers came to my house, they wouldn't literally take every single thing. They would only take what they're looking for, jewelry, money, etc. If grape pickers came through a vineyard, they wouldn't take every single grape. They'd probably just take a few grapes that they need and then walk through. And he says, this is not what is going to happen to you. The robbers are nicer than the nations are going to be when they destroy you, Edom. So number one is just this promise of judgment. It's going to be major judgment upon Edom. So that's section 1. Section 2 is the justification for judgment. What did Edom do to deserve such destruction? They're living on the clefts of the rocks. They're feeling pretty good. Why are they going to be destroyed? There are 4 reasons. And as I list these 4 reasons, I want you to be thinking about in what ways might we be like the Edomites. So there are 4 justifications. Justification 1, being silent in the face of evil. So if you look at verse 10, because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. Verse 11, on the day you stood aloof, while strangers carried off Jacob's wealth, and foreigners entered Jacob's gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. On the day you stood aloof, you stood doing nothing. The Babylonians came and seized Jerusalem and destroyed, murdered, raped, pillaged, killed people, and you did nothing. So the first problem with the Edomites was that they did nothing when their brother was suffering. Number 2 was rejoicing in the suffering of another. So it wasn't just that they didn't do anything, they also rejoiced. Verse 12, you should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. The problem was, they saw their brother being destroyed, and they felt good about it. They said they got what was coming to them. They deserved it. Number 3 was taking advantage of the defenseless. Verse 13, you should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor gloat over them in their calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. So we're just ascending up the scales. First, they were just standing aloof. And then they started gloating. And then they plundered them while they were being attacked. The city of Jerusalem was being sieged by the Babylonians, and the Edomites said, this is a great time for me to get some money in here too. And so they entered into the city and take their own wealth as well. That's number 3. Number 4 is verse 14. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of their trouble. Now we've moved, and some of your translations may just say, put up a stop. So there are varying different observations about this verse. Either this means when the people were fleeing from Jerusalem to avoid being massacred, the Edomites stood there and blocked them. Or the Edomites literally killed them as they came out of the city. Either way, we're talking about the Edomites now have an active role, not just a passive role. The first 3 are kind of passive. They're being plundered, they're gloating over them, they're not doing anything. In verse 4, they're finally doing something active. They're literally standing there as a blockade to make sure that they don't escape. So we covered the first 2 sections of Obadiah. The first section was a promise of judgment. Edom, you will be destroyed. Section number 2, why will you be destroyed? Because you stood aloof, because you gloated over them, because you plundered them, and because you stopped their fugitives from escaping. Now we're in section 3, which is the expansion of judgment. Verse 15 says, the day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. Verse 15 that says the day of the Lord is actually a very common thing that occurs in many of the prophets. So if you ever are doing a Bible reading plan and you see the day of the Lord was supposed to be a day in which Yahweh would come down and give blessings upon his friends and destruction upon his enemies. And so the day of the Lord was what the Israelites were looking forward to. They said, we're really excited for the day of the Lord when these people will be destroyed. I recently did a paper on Amos. There was a section where the Israelites were really looking forward to the day of the Lord, and the prophet says to them, the day of the Lord will include the blessing of the friends and destruction of the enemies, but are you sure that you are God's friends? Here, that's not the message. The message here is just the day of the Lord will come, the destruction of the Lord's enemies will take place. But look at what it says at the end of that first sentence in verse 15. The day of the Lord is near for all nations. We've been talking about Edom the whole time, saying that Edom will be destroyed. And then that judgment gets expanded. That's why I'm calling it the expansion of judgment. Instead of it just being Edom that's destroyed, now all nations will be destroyed. Interestingly, there's a little bit of wordplay here because the word Adam in Hebrew means man or mankind. And then Edom is referring to this people. And so when they say at the beginning they say Edom will be destroyed, and later they say Adam will be destroyed. There's some wordplay here to say, actually, it's not just Edom, it's actually Adam. All people will be destroyed, whoever is not following the Lord's commands. And then as it continues, there's some strange things about geography. Most of what they're saying at the end here is that Esau or Edom, they will be destroyed, there will be no survivors, and the Mount Zion, which is where Jerusalem is, Mount Zion will be the center, and everyone else will be worshiping God on Mount Zion, and it will stretch as far as the Negev, all the way to the land of the Philistines. Like, the Lord's kingdom will be great. That's all it's saying. Okay, so to recap, promise of judgment, Edom will be destroyed. Reason for judgment, or justification for judgment, Edom did bad things when Edom's brother was being attacked. And then expansion of judgment, it's not just Edom, it's everybody. And that's important for us too, because we read this and we say, well, I don't remember cutting off any fugitives. I don't remember plundering Jerusalem. But as it's saying here, the day of the Lord is near for all nations. It's going to apply to us as well. There are three applications that I think we can take from this small book in the Old Testament. The first one is to be active against evil. I told you this trolley problem at the beginning. I was telling you how people sometimes feel guilty about letting other people suffer harm. But there are ways in which we sometimes are not speaking out against evil that we see. For example, the most common one I would say is actually gossiping. Like, you hear somebody like bad-mouthing somebody else, kind of just let it go. Maybe you don't contribute. Maybe you're like, I'm going to say okay. But you let this other person just get railed on from other people. Like, other people are just like, this person is like absolutely bad stuff, and you just like kind of let it happen. This is something that everybody struggles with, because you don't want to be the one person who's like, oh, well, this person's not that bad, because then you'll look kind of like embarrassing. But I would encourage you, there can be something wrong with staying silent in the face of somebody being attacked. It doesn't mean that you have to be this super high moralist where you say, that's a sin to gossip. There are ways in which you can say it in a reasonable way. Somebody says something and you say, whoa, we should maybe like pump the brakes a little bit on this. Or you say like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but like, let's talk about something more uplifting. Like, there are ways in which you can more say it with more tact instead of being super hard on gossiping. You can just say, hey, I think we should let go easy on this guy. I mean, like, anything that's kind of simple to say. We shouldn't be so active. We should not allow other people to be actively evil against another person. It's not just in gossiping too. I mean, maybe some of you have seen somebody and they, like, let's say that there's somebody and somebody else is like yelling at them, or somebody else is just saying mean things to them. Standing up against evil is also something that's demanded of us. That's what the Edomites are being judged for, is like not doing anything, standing aloof. And how often do we stand aloof when we see somebody else being attacked? Number two is, don't rejoice in the demise of your enemy. And here's the tough one for us. Edom treated Israel like its enemy. They were brothers, but barely brothers. They really hated Israel. When Israel got destroyed, they felt like, you know what? I'm happy for them. I'm happy that they got destroyed. We think, actually, I don't know. Do we think that we do the same thing? I would hope so, because a lot of us do, unfortunately. We see somebody who deserves it. So let's say, somebody got into a bad relationship, and then eventually, like, there's some hurt, and then they broke it off, and you're like, that's what I told you. I warned you about that. I warned you about that guy. Now it happened. I told you I was a wise person. Like, we do that kind of stuff all the time, in which we say, something bad happened to you? Sucks to suck. Like, that was your fault. You shouldn't have done that. And there are ways in which we need to avoid gloating over other people in the day of their distress. Ezekiel 33:11, the Lord says, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked. God doesn't want the wicked to be destroyed. So if you see something bad happening to somebody else, even if they deserve it, even if they're wicked, God doesn't have any pleasure in that. So we, as God's people, also should not have any pleasure in that. If you've ever watched that football movie, Facing the Giants, which is kind of I don't like that movie. It's super cheesy. The main reason I don't like that movie is because it's low-key kind of prosperity gospel. It's like this dude, bad football coach, bad football team, and then he starts praying, and then his team wins the championship. I'm like, if it were that easy, bro, everyone would be a Christian. But the main opposition in this movie facing the Giants, so we've got this good Christian football coach, and then we've got Bobby Lee Duke, and he's this like big dude, bald, he's like sucking a lollipop all the time, and he's like super annoying and mean, and he's a jerk, and he's super prideful. And at the end of the movie, when he loses, like, throws his hat down, and he's all mad, and I think probably 95+% of us were like, haha, he deserved it. He had it coming because he was a bad person, a jerk, right? And I think that there is something to be said for we should celebrate righteousness winning. But there's a difference between celebrating righteousness winning and celebrating evil losing. In the sense that we should always be celebrating when good things happen. That doesn't mean that we say, this person, something bad happened to him, good, he deserves it. We're talking about the pleasure. God does not have any pleasure in the destruction of the wicked. And it's a hard message because we just think these people deserve it. But I think that, in this book, it's telling us the Edomites are in trouble for gloating over their brother in the day of his misfortune. Here's number 3. Do not enact the Lord's vengeance. This seems pretty obvious to all of us. Of course, we don't go up beating people. I don't think anyone here is Batman by night. But that doesn't mean that we don't also sometimes feel like we want to enact the Lord's vengeance in small ways. Think about it this way. Did Judah, the people who were destroyed, sacked by the Babylonians, did they deserve the destruction of Jerusalem? Actually, God says yes. God sent the Babylonians. The prophets say all the time, your city is being destroyed because you failed to obey my commandments. So interestingly enough, the people of Judah deserve to be destroyed, and God still punishes the Edomites for harming them. As in, Judah was guilty, and God still said you're not supposed to attack them. God sent the Babylonians, he sent bad things upon them, and he still blamed the Edomites when the Edomites went and attacked them. Because vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. This is not for us to do, this is the Lord's doing. And so sometimes in small areas, I'll give you a pretty common example. So I've seen this TikTok trend, YouTube Shorts trend of people I'm not on TikTok, by the way, in case this was a stumbling block for anybody else. I'm not on TikTok. But I've seen this trend where people will go into Chipotle's, and because Chipotle is famously giving you very small portions, they'll record, right? To make sure to either dox the Chipotle workers who don't give them enough food, or if they give them a lot of food, then they'll be like, here's the tip. If you want to get lots of food, you take your phone into Chipotle. And this is just their way of getting back at the corporation, because the corporation is getting cheap on them, not giving them enough food. So it's time for us to put in the work, and we're going to get our food from Chipotle. Evil corporation, they deserve it. But vengeance is mine, says the Lord. It's a small example, but sometimes we think that way. We think, oh, but this is just a evil multi-billion-dollar corporation, so they don't deserve our respect. But that thing can also trickle down into other aspects of our lives. My boss is a jerk. He doesn't deserve me giving my full attention to my work. If I don't put in my full hours, oh well, he didn't deserve it. And it may be true. Your boss may 100% not deserve your work. It happens a lot. But there's a difference between your boss not deserving your work and vengeance is mine, says the Lord. The Lord is the one who's going to enact justice. You don't do the one who's enacting the justice here. Same thing with, if we've been mistreated by somebody, and it could be a friend, it could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be a parent. And we say, well, they did this to me, so they deserve this back to them. That just always feeds a cycle of doing it back and back and back, and nobody ends up stopping. But we say it's because they deserve it. And again, it may be true that they do. You could actually affirm that this person deserves it and still say, I'm not going to give it back to them. Because as I said, the nation of Judah did deserve this punishment. God is very clear throughout the Old Testament that the destruction of Judah was because of their sins. And yet he still says the Edomites were wrong for attacking Judah because the Edomites did not have God's commission to do so. So as we reflect here on this small book, but powerful book, I want us to be thinking of the ways in which we might be treating our enemies the way that Edom treated their enemies. It could be as small as not doing anything, being inactive. When we see somebody that we don't like being attacked, we say, oh well, I didn't like him anyway. It could be a little bit more active. It could be to the point where you are rejoicing. Instead of just like passively observing, you're rejoicing. When you see your enemy suffer, you say, aha, he deserved it. Or it could be active to the point where you say, I'm going to do something to get them back. Either of these three stages, all of them are sins to the Lord. So as we reflect, I would encourage you, and I will be doing the same thing myself, to be thinking about who might be somebody who you consider an enemy. And if you don't use the word enemy, which I hope you do not, maybe somebody you don't like. Who's somebody who's been getting on your nerves recently? It could be a coworker, a boss, someone in your family relationship, somebody who's been getting on your nerves a lot. How have you been treating a person who's been getting on your nerves a lot? The Bible's clear about how we should. I'll open us up in prayer, and then we will have about 2 minutes of silence to just reflect on this, and then I will close this out in prayer. Holy Spirit, would you be here present? Would you tear down any walls that all of us, including myself, build up, so that we would hear from you in this moment of silence?